Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2019 war film 1917. Now, this film is, in all honesty, one of the best war films, at least to me personally, and one of the finest spectacles of filmmaking and just films in general in a long time. This is one of those movies that's so visually breathtaking and stunning that I'm kicking myself that I did not see this in the theater when it came out in 2019 on the biggest screen possible. And I'm envious of those of you who got that opportunity to see this film in IMAX or just on the big screen, because this is one of those movies that is truly something spectacular. Now, 1917 is directed by Sam Mendes, and honestly, I think this is his most impressive work to date. And that's saying a lot because Sam Mendes has done a lot of really high quality work throughout his career. He directed Skyfall, which was also a really well shot and well directed movie, as well as other films. But 2019 really brought us something truly unique, truly one of a kind with 1917, because of the fact that this was a unbelievable feat of filmmaking. Because of the fact that Sam Mendes decided to shoot pretty much the entire film as close to one shot as he possibly could. So as a result, he had to plan the film out beat by beat and find a rhythm for each portion of the film that he decided to shoot. And not only that, he had to train his actors to work along with this rhythm and to stay in tune and stay on time. He also had to work alongside his production designer. I believe his name is David Gassner. And he had to work alongside him to build sets that were tied directly into the shots that he was going to film for the movie. So everything was very organic, everything was interconnected. And so it was incredibly ambitious, and it was also utilizing camera techniques and other tricks of the trade that had never been implemented in this capacity before. So that's why, for me personally, even though you could look at some other films in his filmography and maybe see them as something that's on par with or possibly superior to his work in this movie, because of the technical mastery behind this film, that's why this gets the edge for me. And I don't know how he's going to top it, because of the fact that this is such a unique and personal project for him as well. You could just feel the passion and just sense it in every frame and every shot of this film. You could tell that this was a passion project of his from the very beginning. It has a very definitive soul and spirit to it. And the reason for that is because this is something that he wanted to do to honor his grandfather and other individuals who fought in World War One, and to honor those that still remained and those that perished and are no longer with us. This was in a lot of ways a legacy kind of film for Sam Mendes. And you can really see that. This is a movie that features some absolutely just breathtaking, tremendous, just unbelievably amazing shots. The way that he worked alongside Roger Deakins was nothing short of just pure spectacle. And yeah, just the way that he set up his shots was meticulous and detailed, and it had to be that way. Otherwise, the film wouldn't necessarily work. The direction, the decision that he decided to take or make for this film would have been considered to be too jarring and out of place if you didn't have everything that was just meticulously crafted by Sam Mendes. This is one of those films you just can't take your eyes off of it. The camera is constantly moving. It's never stagnant. It's always showcasing some kind of energy or some kind of motion, and it's tapped directly into the emotion of the scene or of a character. It breathes, it lives, and it just immerses you into this film's story and this world that's based on history, based on reality in a way that you've never seen before. The night window scene is one of the most jaw-dropping sequences I have seen in all of cinema. I seriously would put it right up there with some of the most spectacular, just awe-inspiring sequences in film. It's that accomplished and it's that amazing. So yeah, I cannot give Sam Mendes enough credit for his direction in this. It is a tour de force, and it's just a sight to behold. It really is. And I think he should get some credit too for the script because of the fact that he worked alongside screenwriter Christy Wilson Cairns, and she essentially was his guide to navigate through the waters of writing for the first time because Sam Mendes had never written a film before. This is something that he was initially thinking about doing, but he was having a hard time finding a project that he wanted to do after Spectre, and he had all these projects that were offered to him, but nothing really caught his eye or really got his interest. And there were some financiers, some producers that were like, "Hey Sam, why don't you write something?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm not a writer. I don't know about that, but you just go ahead and give it a shot. You never know." And then he remembered the stories that his grandfather used to tell him when he was young about his time in the trenches in World War One, and that inspired him to write 1917. And instead of just doing everything himself and kind of letting his ego take the reins and navigate these waters alone, he brought in a established writer. And I think the results are really great. I think this is honestly a good example of how you can step aside, even as an accomplished director, during the writing process and collaborate with another writer and create something that's more tight, that's more polished, that doesn't have nearly as many errors or mistakes, and you don't really fall for the same pitfalls that other first time writers wind up falling for, because you have somebody there who's able to navigate all of these obstacles and all of these potential traps. And I really love this script. I really do. It's simple, but at the same time, it's also fairly complex. And what do I mean by that? It's a simple plot in terms of having these two characters who are the focal point of the movie. Um, these two men, um, Will and Tom, and they are tasked with going through enemy lines and delivering a message to another battalion to tell them to stand down, because they are scheduled to go and attack a German front within a matter of, I think it was like a day or two, and it's a trap. It's a setup. The Germans set it up in a way where they want the European, I wouldn't say European, the British, they want the British army to go to this battle, because they've set it up where they outnumber the soldiers. And if this battle happens, it will be a unbelievable, catastrophic loss of life for the infantry. So the stakes are rather high. But on top of that, there's also a personal connection to things, because Tom's brother is a part of the battalion that would be on the front lines and in the first wave if this battle were to take place. And the movie essentially plays out with these two going through the trenches, going through the deadlands, the wastelands, the just eerie, empty bunkers of enemy lines, to try to deliver this message. And along the way, tragedy ensues where Tom loses his life, and it's Will who carries on. And he continues to risk his life and limb to carry on the legacy of Tom, his fallen friend, and deliver the news to his brother in person that Tom has passed, and to tell him that Tom was a good man. And there does get to a certain point, though, where that's not enough to drive Will on. So Will then has a moment where he realizes the increasing magnitude of him delivering this message. And the way that the script handles that, I thought was really poignant. He comes across a group of soldiers in the woods, and he sees all their forlorn and just sad and just exhausted faces, and hears one of the soldiers singing a song, and that really speaks to him, and that gives him the extra motivation that he needs to deliver this message and even run into the middle of a battlefield in order to get to the commanding officer and tell him to stand down in the film's climactic sequence. So yeah, it sounds like, oh, it's not much, right? But like I said, there is a certain complexity to it. Despite the simplicity of the plot, with these two soldiers trying to deliver a message to prevent further loss of life in the middle of a war, there are certain complexities that involve the various different dichotomies and inner workings of a war, and just the dynamics between soldiers and their commanding officers. And there's one particular element of this script which I feel is just really something special. And it's how it maintains and finds a balance of different emotions, both positive and negative, and different visuals that showcase the horror of war, but also the beauty of nature and the beautiful merits of men in war and what they're willing to sacrifice and what they're willing to risk for themselves and for their country. And the way that the script finds this balance is really impressive to me because there's so many scenes that are just absolutely horrific with Will and Tom going through the trenches that are full of dead bodies and skulls and corpses and dead animals. Then to go from that to surviving a booby trap and then having Will go on his own on this mission and find different ways to persevere. And there's one sequence in particular, which I think really does showcase this balance. And it's after he jumps into the river after the night window scene. Actually, the night window scene happens before that sequence. It's after he successfully runs away from the opposition and he jumps into the river. And he jumps into the river and falls off a waterfall, and you think he might be a goner, but then you realize that he's still alive, and he's floating through this river, and there are these cherry blossoms that are floating in the river next to him. And then after that moment of just unbelievable, just awesome beauty, the beauty of nature, and the realization that he's still breathing and he's still alive, he then has to swim and climb over a multitude of dead, bloated corpses to get to dry land. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to the complexity of this script and how you just find a way to showcase this balance of darkness and light within a war. And there are even sequences like the night window scene that just also brilliantly showcase this with the way that shadows are used and the way that light is incorporated into that sequence. I also like the fact that throughout a good chunk of the movie, he doesn't have a weapon. His weapon is his wits, it's his smarts, and it's his tenacity. It's his steeliness, his willingness to survive and to beat the odds and deliver uh, a message to Tom's brother and and tell the commanding officer the orders to stand down in order to save multiple lives on the front lines. And I like that. It created a really unique bit of tension during sequences later on in the movie where Will is being shot at and he's got to find a way to sneak around behind enemy lines and in these ruins, and sometimes has to take somebody out with nothing but his bare hands. And yeah, it does create some really palpable tension. And I love how the film's climactic sequence doesn't even involve him doing anything other than running across a field while there's bombs going off in the background and him trying to stay upright and avoid the soldiers that are running into battle and potentially running to their doom. And I like that a lot. I think that's very different, and I love the way that the film opens with Will and Tom just having a moment on the grass, enjoying the scenery, enjoying nature, and the company of one another. And I love how that's juxtaposed with the ending of the film, where Will, after he delivers the sad news to Tom's brother, the last shot of the film is him finding some peace and quiet and solitude and sitting next to a tree and once again enjoying and admiring the scenery and the beauty of nature and appreciating the things that he has in life and looking at the photos of his loved ones, and then it fades to black. I really love that. I think that's really different. That's very unique when it comes to these war films. A lot of these war films, they're very heavy. They're very dark. They don't really showcase the light much. And that's one of the things that really makes this film stand out on a considerable level compared to some of the other films in the genre, because it showcases that light amongst the darkness of war. And it doesn't shy away from the violence or the brutality of war either. You got people who are wounded and are hurting bad, and people get blown up and people die. I mean, you got the whole stuff with Tom. He's willing to sacrifice himself to save Will, and he manages to do so and saves him from the rubble. But in the process, he doesn't make it. He doesn't make the journey, but Will finishes it. Will completes the journey for him. And yeah, there's a certain just camaraderie and brotherhood that you definitely do feel with this script as well, which really does tap into um, the dynamic of soldiers and war. And yeah, it's a film that's beautifully poetic at times and just visually impressive, but other times it's harrowing. It's harrowing, it's intense, and it really does capture the just deadly nature of war. So, yeah, I cannot sing enough praises for this script. A simple overall plot, but it's something that is continually driving forward. It doesn't it doesn't really slow down for the most part. There's a couple scenes where things are stopped momentarily, but there's always this ticking clock in the background. So even those moments don't really lead to anything that is that tedious or feel like time is being wasted. There's always this sense of increasing tension that builds throughout the narrative, and I think the writers just did a great job maintaining that, as well as showcasing enough about these characters and Tom and Will to make you really like these characters and learn to appreciate them on a deeper, more human level. And that appreciation for the humanity of these characters continues throughout the film, where you see these different dynamics with the different commanding officers and how they respond to a situation. How some are, let's just say, more focused on winning the war or disillusioned, versus others that still have hope. It creates a really interesting dichotomy where you will have characters that will say things like hope is a dangerous thing, and that the only way that the war is going to be won is if you're the last man standing. But then you have other people who are willing to put their neck out and do what they can to inspire and really be there for Will to get him to continue on his journey. So yeah, it's a really solid script. Even the sequence where Will meets Tom's brother and tells him that his brother is gone. Like that scene is heart wrenching, but it's handled with care and with appreciation for the moment and for the gravity of it. And it really carries a serious weight as a result. No, it's not an action orientated script or story, but that's not the point. If you want like action and wall to wall battle scenes, you're not going to get that with this narrative. But what you get though is teeth grinding, nail biting tension where time is the enemy, like the tagline for the film says, with strong, heroic characters who carry the film and carry the narrative through the bombshells and the gunfire and the carnage and the chaos. And as great as the direction is and the writing is for the film, this is also a movie that really needed dynamic, strong, and just capable performances from its cast, in particular the two leads. And George MacKay and Dean Charles Chapman, who play Will and Tom, they deliver truthfully terrific performances. I mean, these are really tremendous performances, especially for actors that were relatively young, so to speak, in terms of their experience when it comes to this kind of film. And Mendes chose these two on purpose because he didn't want this film to be something where you had like two big names playing the two lead characters, because he felt like he wanted to cast unknowns to really showcase how the war really was and show a certain sense of realism and an immersion that I don't really think you would have obtained with bigger names playing these two characters. And honestly, they deliver performances that are top notch and tremendous in their own right, especially George MacKay. I think or I think it was like Mackay. Um, yeah, I really love his performance in this. A lot of people have said he has a certain steeliness to him that's very old fashioned. He's very withdrawn sometimes in terms of his emotions, but he's very headstrong. And I think that's a great way to sum up his performance. Is a very headstrong, resilient performance. He did a lot of his own stunts as well, and that really does show his commitment to another level. Dean Charles Chapman, he's also really great as Tom. He has really good chemistry with Will. The George and Dean, they became fast friends on the set of the movie, and you could really sense the passion that Dean had for this character. You if you watch interviews with Dean, and he's talking about Tom, and he really genuinely loves this character. And you can see that when it comes to his performance. He mentioned how during the death scene, he was deeply moved by it. After they finished shooting it, like he cried because it really did affect him on a deeper level because he lost himself in Tom. And that's how you get some of the best performances is when you have these actors really get into these roles so much to the point where they become these characters. And you can't see the line between actor and character where it just turns into something where they are playing someone who appears to be real and genuine. And it definitely helped that you had these bigger names that had these bit parts, because it did add a certain extra size and scope to things. Where you got Mark Strong, who plays Captain Smith, and I really like the fact that Mark Strong played a character who wasn't a villain. It was against the usual kind of role that he would be offered, and so it was refreshing to see him play a captain who had a real heart to him. That was really nice to see. And he pulled that off just as about as well as he did any of his other villain roles. Andrew Scott was a blast as this cheeky lieutenant uh, who Will and Tom have to essentially get his permission to go into enemy lines and start their journey. And he's just he's a cheeky bastard, but it's really an entertaining bit role from him. uh Richard Madden, he played Joseph Blake, Tom's older brother, and he's only in it for like one scene, but he just does such a great job showing the remorse and the grief, and just the sense of pride even in that moment for his brother, knowing that he's passed, in such a really just raw and real way. It was a really poignant performance, and he did it all in one take, which makes it even more impressive. Colin Firth is also in this as General Aaron Moore. He's in it for like a brief scene in the beginning, but there's a certain steady uh, nature that he brings to his character, and this commanding presence that really does anchor the film from the opening scenes. Benedict Cumberbatch plays a lieutenant colonel. He plays Mackenzie, and he's not in it for a lot either, but he does still leave a lasting impression because he plays a fairly complex character. He's a man who's driven and he wants to win the war, but he realizes the limitations of that, and he carries the weight of the potential loss of all of his men on his shoulders, and he wants to end the war so more lives aren't lost, but at the same time he also wants to win the war for his own recognition. And so there's this inner turmoil that's going on with this character, and that's what leads to him initially not wanting to listen to Will when he's telling him, I got orders, you need to stand down. And he's like, no, I'm not going to stand down. We can win this war. We have them retreating. And Will is like, no, it's not going to work. And you have to read the message. And he reads the message, and then he reluctantly tells everybody to stand down. But even after that, he has this sense of just realization that even though the men's lives are saved now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be saved going forward, because they're still going to have to go back onto the front lines. They're still going to have to go back into the trenches when new orders are given. And that's why he says, I was hoping that today would be a good day. And that just shows you like the gravity of war and of the situation, that in order for things to be good, in order for it to be a good day, is victory, because that's the only way things will stop, unless both sides decide to stop fighting. And that's the reality of war. The reality of war is something along the lines of what the lieutenant colonel was saying, that war stops when there's only one man standing, one man left standing, one side left standing, or the two sides have beat the hell out of each other so much and so often that they're exhausted and they can't fight anymore. And that's the cold, hard reality of war. And the film isn't afraid to show that. And it does help that you have an actor like Benedict Cumberbatch playing that role to really provide another sense of balance to the film. And I think that's another reason why these two relatively unknown actors who play the two leads are not swallowed up by the film and by the weight of the movie, because of the fact that they have these established veteran actors who are at the top of their game to be there to anchor them and to keep them connected and support them throughout the production. And speaking of things that support the movie, cannot give enough credit to the production designer, uh, Gassner. It's either David or Dennis Gassner. I think that's what his last name is, and he's a longtime collaborator with Sam Mendes. In fact, I am going to look up the production designer's name, because I just want to be fair, and I want to make sure that I'm getting the name correct, because the man deserves just a unbelievable amount of accolades for his work on this movie, because this is just unbelievable impressive stuff from a production design standpoint. um yeah, Dennis Gassner. So I might have said David at one point earlier on in the review, and I apologize for that. But yes, Dennis. So Dennis Gassner, he was a production designer for this, and he did the production design for Blade Runner 2049 and Skyfall and a lot of other Sam Mendes films. But his production and design in this is even a step up above those. He had to follow the same guidelines and paths that Sam Mendes set up for the blocking for the actors and other people in the film. And as a result, he had to build his sets around all of this. So he had to do something that had never been done before, where he had to build sets that were a certain length that fit the certain amount of time that Sam Mendes was going to shoot a particular scene. And so the sets couldn't even be built until these scenes were blocked out and were structured. And he built these sets, and these sets are just so incredible. They look like they actually are from the war. They're so lifelike, they're so realistic. And it's just a really, really stunning series of sets, to the point where they don't even look like sets. They just look like reality. It looks like they were able to time travel and go back in time into the trenches of World War One, or into the ruins of a city that had been bombed to oblivion. Just really impressive, just incredible feats of production design. And another thing that's incredible, of course, is Roger Deakins' cinematography. The man is a dynamo, and this film is no exception. I mean, there are shots in this that are just absolutely mind-blowing. The night window scene, any sequence involving a light and shadow, the sequence on the fields near the end of the movie where Will is running in the battlefield to deliver the message for the lieutenant colonel to stand down. Just a really terrific, just amazing work of art by Roger Deakins. And the editing by Lee Smith was also excellent. It really added to the tension and the excitement and just the thrills of a certain scene or the emotion of it. And speaking of emotion, the score. This score by Thomas Newman is, I had a hard time. I messed up pronouncing his last name, because this score, it leaves me speechless. The score is that stupendous. It's that spectacular. The emotion that he is able to wring out of this score and out of this film is just second to none. It really is. And this is honestly one of the best scores I've heard in a film in like the past decade or more. It's a criminal shame that this did not win best score at the Oscars. I fail to understand or realize why this lost that award. The score that is featured in the night window scene and the sequence in the film's finale with Will running on the fields. The both of those pieces of music are just absolute perfection to me and are just a prime example of how much a great score can elevate a sequence. And the collaborative nature of this film doesn't just extend to the technical uh, merits of the movie or the people who are working on it. It also extends to the composer because he worked and composed music in real time while certain scenes were being shot for the film, which is really something else. It's another reason why this film stands out among a lot of its peers in the genre. And it's also a movie that's almost 2 hours, but it's never slow. It's never boring. It goes by at a pretty quick, brisk pace. And it's consistently engaging and captivating and compelling for the entirety of the running time. Uh, I know I've talked about this movie for like over 40 minutes, but I had to because I genuinely admire this movie. I think this film is amazing. I think it's a great film and I cannot recommend it enough. So anyway, thank you for watching me sing the praises of 1917 and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.